a recent poll released by Probe Research, Manitoba NDP now has the highest level of support for the first time since the party lost power in 2016 election. Now, another poll made by Angus Reid Institute said that 67% believes that Mr. Brian Pallister did a poor job in dealing with the COVID-19. Now, last week, NDP members strongly endorsed your leadership in your party's convention with an awesome 93% support. Now, from this data, this is my opinion. From this data, I think it is fair to say that NDP will form the next government. My question, Wab, is this. How do you prepare yourself to become the next premier of Manitoba come 2023?
Well, I'm very honored and humbled by your confidence. I also want to say that certainly there's a lot more work to do, and we do have to stay humble, and we can't take anything for granted. There still is probably more than 2 years before the election. A lot can change, so I don't want to put too much stock in any one data point because I know we have a lot of hard work to do to talk to Manitobans, to make sure that we're on the right side, the different issues of healthcare, jobs, just making life more affordable, education, schools. How can we make life better on all those topics for people? So I just want to start by saying, of course, I appreciate all the, good news that you're sharing, but at the same time, I want to acknowledge that we're not taking anything for granted. We're going to work very hard, and we are going to stay humble. But I do think that, I think if I can answer your question this way, what we have to do, both as a party, with our whole team and myself as leader, is I think we have to get out there and talk to Manitobans about the issues that matter to people like you and to all your viewers and listeners out there. And, I think the pandemic has given us an opportunity to talk about healthcare, which is something that we're very credible on and we think is very important. And of course, we support all the people who work in healthcare. But now we're also seeing the importance of education, because everyone has seen how our kids' schools have been turned upside down because of the pandemic. First, the schools were closed and then they reopened. In some cases for high school kids, the reopening has only been a few days a week, and there's a lot of remote learning going on. So we really have to put together a good plan to make sure that all the kids out there can get the best quality education and reach their full potential. And the other issue I've really been noticing throughout the pandemic is affordability. I think that the cost of everything has gone up. The cost of everything has gone up. Maybe it's because businesses had to buy protective equipment and, plastic shields and stuff like that. But for whatever reason, it seems like the cost of living has really gone up. People's rent went up. Even a trip to somewhere like McDonald's or Dollarama, it costs you more money. Plus, on top of that, you had the Pallister government raise people's hydro bills and just make life more expensive. So that's an issue that's really important to me too. And I think we got to put a lot of work on. So the way we're going to, I think, carry ourselves over the next few years until the election, we're going to be the team that listens. We're going to bring those issues forward to make life more affordable, to make sure there's a lot of good jobs in healthcare, jobs in education. But we're also going to be putting the plans together. So if we do get the great honor of forming a government, that we'll be ready to go on day one and put those plans into place.
I would like to go back to healthcare, specifically pandemic. I was reading the external review of the COVID-19 outbreak at Maples Home Care. And the health minister, Stephenson, said that the province is committed to implementing these recommendations, the 17 recommendations of the 74-page report. Now, I told myself when I was reading this report last night, these recommendations should have been the practice in a normal health institution, as the review suggested proper planning, communication, clarity, staffing and duties and responsibilities. Now, in my opinion, these were basic rules that should have been observed in the first place. Now, what do you think about this external review and its recommendations? And what do you think are missing in this report?
Well, I think there's a lot that's missing, and there is a lot that I actually criticize with this report. I do respect the person who wrote the report, but there was something that was very telling in the press conference. The reporters asked, what about the fact that Rivera lied about the staffing levels? And the person who wrote the report was shocked. She had a press conference. Nobody told me that Rivera lied about the staffing levels. So right away, a little light bulb went off above my head, and I started to think, well, sounds like this person didn't have all the information. And so I went and reviewed the report, as well as my staff, the other members of our team. We took a look at the report, and what we saw in there was very disappointing. So if we rewind to last fall, when there was that terrible tragedy at Maples, when all the seniors unfortunately passed away in a short amount of time, let's think back to that time, and what was it that was so offensive? What bothered us as Manitobans about that? Yeah. Well, for me, one, it was the fact that we lost 8 seniors in 48 hours. But 2, we only found out about it because a paramedic posted on social media about it. The government, the care home, nobody ever publicized the details. It only came out because a paramedic posted about it anonymously. And then the media followed up on, and then the government was forced to respond. And then the third thing was the point that I just mentioned, which was that the company involved actually initially lied about how many staff were working, and the government accepted that lie, and then they acted a few days later. So if we think about those 3 issues, the loss of life, the fact it only came out due to Reddit, and then also the attempted cover-up, and you look at that report, it's not in there. None of those 3 issues are dealt with in that report or in the recommendations, right? The loss of life is not even mentioned until page 25. I was shocked by that, because to me, that should have been page 1. Yeah. Page 1 of this report should have been, there was a tragic loss of life for elders, well-respected seniors in our community. How can we prevent this from happening again? But they didn't talk about that in the report. Instead, they went into a different direction, talking about, standards and management in this. So I found the report to be quite lacking in credibility as a result. And if you look at the recommendations, which one of those recommendations would make sure that we don't have to rely on a paramedic posting to Reddit the next time there is a tragedy? There's no recommendation that's actually going to prevent that. Which recommendation in this report would prevent another long-term care company from trying to cover up their lack of staff? Mm-hmm. There's no recommendation about that, right? So what I see actually taking place is the government is trying to shift the story. They're trying to shift the story and avoid answering the tough questions of what really happened at Maples. And they're bringing forward this report and these so-called recommendations to solve a problem that's actually different than the one that we really wanted to address. So that's on the issue of the report specifically. But stepping back to a higher level, I would say this: whether it's the incident at the Maples or just the pandemic overall, I think we have seen that we need to totally improve the way that we care for seniors in our society. And this is one of the lessons I hope that we never forget, even if the pandemic, comes to an end, which we all want very soon. I hope that we don't forget that we have to treat seniors in Manitoba better. Mm-hmm. And so what I would like to see is we have to treat the people who work with the seniors better, the healthcare aides, the nurses. They need more protective equipment. They need to be better paid. They need to have more access to staff to support them in their work, so they're not just out there on their own. We also need to ensure that each patient has more one-on-one time with people caring for them directly. The stories you heard coming out of Maples were tragic, and it reflected the fact that no not enough people were there to help care for those seniors, right? Mm-hmm. So we really have to improve the amount of staff and the way we treat those staff people as well. Because if there's one thing I know that we all share as Manitobans, regardless of our cultural backgrounds or geographic location or our religious identity, if there's one thing that I know of us all as Manitobans, it's that we take care of the older generation in our community, and that's what this issue is all about. We gotta do a much better job as a province of taking care of the seniors in our community.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question or comment on that, and sharing as well. Yesterday, I was listening to CJOB with Richard Cloche, afternoon show, and he interviewed Minister Heather Stephenson, and Richard asked the minister who should be responsible. So Richard asked the minister 3 times. And the minister avoided to answer the question, and who is responsible for this until she replied to Richard saying that yes, I accept shared responsibility for this incident after 3 times of asking the same question. Now I would like to ask you, I know this is not the NDP government right now. What if this happened in your government? What would be your immediate answer on serious accountability questions?
The government is the ultimate bearer of responsibility because they supervise and fund the long-term care system. In addition, with some private partners, yes, but at the end of the day, the government is the regulator, the government is the overseer, and in a time of crisis, the government should be the backstop. We're in a pandemic crisis. The government is the one who should have stepped in. If we go back to last October, November, we were asking questions. Many other voices in the community were asking questions. What's happening at Naples? What's happening at Parkview Place? What's happening at other care homes? You know what the government said to us at the time? They said, there's no problem. There's no issue. Everything's fine. Not only did they do that, they actually went on the attack and they said, how dare you ask questions? How dare you try and, fear monger or whatever. And then we saw just days later that there was a major issue. Yeah. And so to me, it highlights one of the challenges and one of the frustrations, to be honest, with this issue is that the same folks who were saying there's no problem right before we had a major problem are now saying, trust us to fix the issue, right? And it seems like the trust has been broken. But the other piece that I wanted to share is that we have a document that it comes from the WRHA and from the Ministry of Health, and it shows that the Minister of Health was made aware of these problems on November 2nd, right? Wow. The big tragic incident happened about 4 days later. So it's not just a theoretical idea that the government could have intervened. We now see the documentation that the government was made aware of this issue and they could have taken steps to protect lives. Mm-hmm. And we know what those ideas were, right? People were saying, ourselves included, we were saying, call in the military, right? We were, other were saying additional staff from other resources, put in those enhanced, pandemic controls so that they can come in safely, et cetera. There were many solutions on the table. Mm-hmm. The government didn't act to take any of those pieces of advice. So I think one of the things we're calling for is for a public inquiry. Yeah, because there are these unanswered questions. And I think a public inquiry could help us to answer, why did it take a paramedic going to Reddit for us to find out about this? Why didn't the care home face accountability? Or any sort of punishment for the mishandling of the situation? Why did the government not respond to the request for more staffing? Why didn't the government call in the military? So these are all questions that could have helped had we answered them differently. Maybe they could have helped the families. Maybe they could have helped the seniors themselves. Maybe they could have helped the healthcare workers. I'm sure the healthcare workers who were working in the facility, I'm sure they were also very traumatized by the experience as well. Mm-hmm. So these are the sort of answers that I think it's important for us to those are the sort of questions that we need to find answers to in order to make sure that we're actually giving seniors the care that is required.
Yeah. Last two questions, sir, before I let you go. I work in downtown. That's my full-time job. This is my passion. This is for the community. I'm not earning anything on this, but I love doing this on the side.
Soon you will.
Yeah. So I work in downtown, and every day I see homeless people inside bus shelters. So on Carlton, on Portage Avenue, on Main. Our good friend, Michael Champagne, the bell tower, on the guy there on Selkirk Avenue, right? Tweeted the other day, and I quote, and I would like to quote, "How do we even have homelessness in Winnipeg when there are so many buildings that are heated and guarded all year long, even through a pandemic? The empty Manitoba housing units are especially insulting. Those buildings receive more care and attention than our relatives on the street." Now, how will the NDP government solve poverty and homelessness in the province in a manner that it would not be, or it would not look like, or it would not be a dole out? Would there be something or programming that this government could offer that would empower the people, empower the needies instead of giving them dole out?
Well, I think we need to meet people where they're at, right? And in order, in some cases, even in order for people to be able to take that step you're talking about, first, maybe we have to deal with addictions issues, mental health issues, some other challenges that they face. So the approach that I like, it's called housing first. It's a housing first approach. And the idea, it's exactly what it sounds like. You get somebody a place to stay, and then you can get them health care, and then you can get them mental health services, you can get them addiction services, and then you can talk about a job opportunity or educational opportunity, if that's the one that they're going to be looking for. But the idea is, first, you can't find a job if you don't have an address. You can't get an appointment at a medical clinic if there's nowhere for the test results to be returned to. So the idea is housing first. And I think, when we're looking at a very visible image in people's minds right now, I think, getting a roof over someone's head, that's the real action that needs to take place in order for us to not only look after the person who is sleeping in the bus shelter, but also for the seniors, for the people who are on their way to work, who are, maybe they want to warm up in the bus shelter too, right? And we have to create a solution that works for everybody in the community. So I think that's part of the approach. And I think not just on homelessness, but talking about poverty generally here, I want us in Manitoba to start thinking about fighting poverty as a healthcare issue. I want us to not just think about it in terms of economic issues. It is partially economic, but it's also a healthcare issue. When we have too many people living in poverty in Manitoba, they are going to have any number of problems with healthcare, and it's going to cause issues across the healthcare system, right? On the other hand, if we can help people to empower themselves, as you say, to lift themselves up, to reach their full potential, they're going to lead a healthier life. It's going to create a stronger healthcare system for all of us, and it's not just a healthcare thing, it's also an education thing. We want our schools to perform better. Why don't we help the kids who are living in poverty to deal with the barriers that they face even before they get to the classroom? And then that's going to help that child succeed if they get a nutritious meal, or if they have assistance overcoming the barriers, it's going to help them directly. But if your child or grandchild is sitting in a classroom with that kid, it's going to help that child of yours succeed as well. Because now all of a sudden, everyone in the classroom is succeeding at a higher level. There's less disruptions. The teacher can spend more time doing the actual work of instruction. And so it really, I think, will benefit everyone in our entire society. Certainly, we can help a lot of people who are dealing with issues like homelessness and poverty directly. But when we do so, we'll also be benefiting everyone else throughout the society too, because there will be less of an impact on the healthcare system and on the educational system, and it'll free up resources to serve Manitobans from all walks of life.
Last question, sir. You will inherit, most likely, a government after, I would call it, a pandemic war. In other words, the present government may likely or surely leave a big mess in terms of governance, economy, leadership, trust of the people, etc. It's a chaotic situation, right? Manitobans are tired. We are, majority are frustrated, and we are hungry for change and improvement of our lives. Now, if Manitoba is a person and they are in front of you right now, what will you tell them?
Well, I think I understand, first of all, why you are feeling the way that you do, because the government failed to prepare for the second wave, even though every expert warned that there was a second wave coming. And so I think part of the frustration comes from the fact that we know that things could have been done better. Things could have been done better, could have been done smarter, and could have been done earlier on. And I'm not saying the pandemic would have missed Manitoba, but maybe the code red wouldn't have had to have lasted so long. Maybe if some of the impacts of the pandemic wouldn't have been as severe. And these are decisions that it's not just Mr. Pallister, it's really the whole PC approach that I think caused the issues. Because in the summertime last year, when we could have been getting ready for a safe back to school, for contact tracing, for testing, they didn't make any of those investments. And sure, Mr. Pallister is to blame, but it's also the PC approach that is to blame. And so whether it's him or whether they replace him in the next election, I think we all need to remember that it is the approach of the PCs that really got Manitoba into trouble. And where we want to improve things and how we want to make things differently is we want to invest. We want to invest in creating a healthcare system, an education system, an economy with lots of jobs that will be able to withstand a shock like the pandemic. I hope it never happens again, but we need to make our province shock-proof, right? We saw what happened. They cut the healthcare system, and then when the shock of the pandemic came, the healthcare system was overwhelmed. Similarly with the economy, business owners were not getting the assistance that they required. A lot of people lost income over the past year. So I think that that's what we want to do, is we want to create and invest in a Manitoba that works for all of us and that is strong and robust, so that should there be future challenges, whether it's a pandemic or a flood or a recession in the future, that we'll know that we have a healthcare system, an education system, and an economy that's going to be strong enough to survive that. Because I think if there's one thing that we've all seen this past year, it's that I think we're all starting to appreciate some of the things that we used to take for granted. And so we want to preserve those things once we get a chance to return to them. And the best way for us to do that is by investing and creating a Manitoba that works for all of us.
Very well said, sir. Thank you very much, Wab.
Well, thank you for the time. And maybe I could make it a hat trick. Maybe I could come on a third time in the future.
Yes, sir. And the next time, maybe I'm hoping and praying that the next episode with you will be an in-person, a face-to-face interview with Wab Kinew.
Well, fingers crossed, eh?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Mabuhay. Maraming salamat, sir.